Chapter 5. Dyloft. The next day, Max Pace visited Clay in the office, which was closed for the day after the previous night's long celebrations.
"You did good work, Clay,"
he said.
"I'll transfer the rest of the money into your bank today. You're doing a great job of looking rich, but be careful. Don't create too much attention."
Let's talk about the next case. Pace sat down.
The drug is Dyloft, manufactured by Ackerman Labs. It's used by sufferers of severe arthritis. It's a new drug. It works very well and patients love it. But it has two problems. First, it's made by a competitor of my client. Second, it's been linked to the creation of small tumors in the bladder. My client, the same client as Tarvan, makes a similar drug that was popular until 12 months ago, when Dyloft became available. Dyloft is growing fast. It's already number 2 in the market and will soon be number 1. A few months ago, my client discovered documents that prove that Ackerman Labs has known about the possible problems with Dyloft for 6 months. Are you following me?
Yes. How many people have taken Dyloft?
Probably 1 million.
What percentage get the tumors?
About 5%.
You want me to sue Ackerman Labs?
The truth about Dyloft will be public knowledge very soon. There hasn't been any litigation yet, but Ackerman is getting ready. It's busy counting its money and saving it to pay the lawyers. The company has a real problem because it's borrowed too much, and now it needs cash. The value of the company is already falling, and the news about Dyloft will probably destroy it completely, which is exactly what my client wants. From inside the company, we have proof that Dyloft is bad, and it will have to settle. It will have no choice. But there's one small problem for us in all this. Most of the tumors don't seem to be dangerous, and they're very small. There's no real damage to the bladder.
So, the litigation will be used to shock the market?
Yes, and of course to compensate the victims. Here's my plan. You put together a group of 50 plaintiffs and file a big lawsuit on behalf of all Dyloft patients. At the same time, you put out a series of TV advertisements soliciting more cases. If you move quickly, you'll get thousands of cases. People will be scared and will phone your free number here in D.C., where you'll have at least half a dozen paralegals answering the calls. It will cost you a lot of money, but if you get, for example, 5,000 cases at $20,000 each, that's $100 million, and your share is 1/3.
That's terrible.
No, Clay. That's mass tort litigation at its finest. That's how the system works.
Pace slid a thick file across Clay's desk.
There are the names and addresses of at least 1,000 possible plaintiffs in here. I also have the name of a company that can prepare a television advertisement, which will bring you thousands of extra clients. The whole thing will cost you a couple of $1 million, but you can afford it. First, you get the clients to sign contracts with your firm, which will take about 2 weeks. It will take 3 days to finish the TV advertisement, and a few days to buy the television time. You'll need to hire paralegals and put them in a rented space out in the suburbs. It's too expensive here. The lawsuit has to be prepared. You have a good staff. Everything should be done in about 30 days. My client wants the lawsuit filed in less than a month.
Clay stood up and walked anxiously around the room. He didn't like the idea of soliciting clients with TV advertisements. It was unprofessional. In addition, he had never handled a lawsuit like this before. But $33 million in fees! He couldn't possibly refuse. "We have work to do," Clay began the meeting in the conference room. He told Paulette, Rodney, and Jonah about Dyloft and its disastrous side effects. Nobody's filed a lawsuit yet, but we're going to change that. On July 2nd, we start the war by filing a class action here in D.C. on behalf of all the patients harmed by the drug. We have some names and addresses, and we start signing up those clients today. Paulette and Rodney, you'll be in charge of that. Jonah, you'll be in charge of employing half a dozen paralegals and finding space out in the suburbs for them to take calls from possible new clients. How much is each Dyloft case worth? Paulette asked. As much as Ackerman Labs will pay. It could be anything from $10,000 to $50,000, depending on the extent of damage to the bladder. And how many cases might we get? After the series of advertisements we'll be putting on TV, it could be several thousand. And how much are the attorney's fees? Paulette asked. The other two were watching Clay very carefully. 1/3, he said. So, if we have 3,000 clients, for example, the firm will get $10 million? Yes, and we're going to share the fees, 10% to each of you. So, that could mean $1 million each? At least, Clay replied. They thought about that figure in silence for a very long time, each one imagining how they would be spending the money. For Rodney, it meant college for the kids. For Paulette, it meant a divorce from the Greek husband she had only seen once in the past year. For Jonah, it meant life on a sailboat. Clay was the first to break the silence. If we work really hard for the next year, there's a good chance we'll have the option of early retirement. Who told you about Dyloft? Rodney wanted to know. I can never answer that question, Rodney. Sorry. Just trust me. And at that moment, Clay hoped that his blind trust in Max Pace wasn't foolish. On the 3rd floor of his new townhouse, Clay made his first entry into the world of mass tort solicitation. He delayed the call until almost 9 p.m., an hour when some people went to bed, especially older people, and maybe those suffering with arthritis. After a strong drink to give him courage, he dialed a number. The phone was answered on the other end by Mrs. Ted Worley of Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Clay introduced himself pleasantly as a lawyer and asked to speak to Mr. Worley. Clay heard some voices in the background, the sound of a baseball game on TV. Then finally a man's voice on the phone. Who is this? Ted Worley angrily demanded. I don't like being interrupted when I'm watching baseball. I'm an attorney here in D.C., and I specialize in lawsuits against companies that manufacture harmful drugs. Okay, what do you want? We found your name on the internet as a possible user of the arthritis drug Dyloft. Can you tell me if you use this drug? Maybe I don't want to tell you. Of course, you don't have to, Mr. Worley, but the only way to discover if you're entitled to a settlement is to tell me if you're using the drug. What kind of settlement? We'll talk about that in a minute. First, I need to know if you're using Dyloft. If not, you're a lucky man. Yeah, I've been taking Dyloft. For how long? Maybe a year. It works great. Any side effects such as blood in your urine, a burning sensation when you urinate? No. Why? The drug has been found to cause bladder tumors in some people who use it. Ackerman Labs, the company that makes Dyloft, has been trying to keep this secret. My firm represents a lot of Dyloft users. I think you should consider being tested. What kind of test? A urine test. We have a doctor who can do it tomorrow. It won't cost you anything. What if he finds something wrong? Then we can discuss your options. When the news of Dyloft comes out in a few days' time, there will be many lawsuits. My firm will lead the attack on Ackerman Labs. I'd like to have you as a client.
Should I stop taking the drug?
Let's do the test first. Dyloft will probably be pulled off the market later this summer.
Where do I do the test?
Clay gave him the name and address of a doctor that Max Pace had chosen for him. When the details were finished, Clay apologized for interrupting the baseball game and said goodbye. It was only then that he realized that his forehead was covered in sweat. Soliciting clients by phone? What kind of lawyer have I become? A rich one, he kept telling himself. 2 days later, Clay visited Ted Worley. The urine test had revealed unusual cells in the urine, a clear sign that there were tumors in the bladder. Although the operation to remove them would not be complicated, Ted Worley and his wife were extremely worried. Clay wanted to tell them that the tumors weren't dangerous, but decided to let the doctor tell them that after the operation. After Clay had explained the contract and answered their questions about litigation, Ted Worley signed the papers and became the first Dyloft plaintiff in the country. By the end of the week, Clay had signed up 3 clients with unusual cells in their urine. Rodney and Paulette, working as a team, had 7 more under contract. The Dyloft class action was ready for war. On July 1st, everyone gathered in front of the television in the conference room to watch the 15-second advertisement advising Dyloft users to call the firm and arrange a free medical test. 2 hours later, all 6 paralegals employed for this job were busy answering calls. At 9 the next morning, Clay received an urgent phone call from the Ackerman Labs attorney. He ordered Clay to stop running the advertisements immediately. The conversation was short and angry, and when it was ended, Clay sent Rodney to the attorney's office with a copy of the 20-page lawsuit against Ackerman Labs. Later that day, Max Pace visited Clay. "I filed the lawsuit," Clay told him. "We've created a lot of excitement. Their lawyers have already called, and I sent them a copy of the lawsuit."
Good. They know they're in big trouble. This is a lawyer's dream, Clay. Enjoy the moment.
"If you were Ackerman's lawyer," Clay asked, "what would you do next?"
"I'd deny everything. Blame it on the greedy trial lawyers. Defend my drug. My first aim would be to protect the price of shares in the company. I'd get the chief executive officer on television to say all the right things. I'd get the lawyers to prepare an organized defense. I'd get the salespeople to persuade the doctors that the drug is okay. Then, I'd have a serious talk with Ackerman Labs. If I found out there were real problems with the drug, I'd calculate how much a settlement would cost. You never go to trial with a bad drug because you can't control the costs. So, if I were Ackerman's lawyer, I'd settle for about $1 billion. And I'd do it fast."
"Will Ackerman do it fast?"
"They haven't hired me, so they're not very bright. They prefer to do it the old-fashioned way. They rely on lawyers who, of course, have no interest in quick settlements."
"So, no quick settlement?"
"You filed the lawsuit less than an hour ago. Relax."
"I know, but all that money you just gave me is going very quickly."
"Relax. In a year's time, you'll be even richer."
The following morning, the Times and the Post printed brief stories of the Dyloft class action on the front pages of their business sections. Both mentioned Clay's name. Both noted that the price of Ackerman Labs shares was falling fast. A photograph of Clay and his team appeared in the Wall Street Journal. In the same newspaper, under the headline, "Young Lawyer Fights Powerful Ackerman Labs," there was an article about Clay and his amazing rise to the top as an important, successful tort lawyer. Clay gave a copy of the article to Jonah. Put this on the internet, he said. Our clients will love it.